experience. I worked in community retail pharmacy throughout Northwest Pennsylvania. I did that for a number of years, shifted to a corporate position within a reasonably large pharmacy chain where we were tasked with developing new revenue streams. So one of the big things that we worked on in that space was immunization services. And then from there, we went into some other things. I would eventually leave that role and I would go and I would work with independent pharmacies on performance contracts. And, how do you work with a bunch of independent pharmacies? Because it's a completely different environment because, independent pharmacies are independent for a reason, done a number of things just around those and tangents and so on and so forth. But I've worked in pharmacy for more than half my life now, so it's been a good run.
Yeah, awesome, incredible. And what really inspired you to focus on a leadership development for pharmacists? Do they even need that skill?
I would tell you, Anam, that that was something that it took me a long time to figure out. It actually took me a longer time than what I'm probably comfortable in admitting. But what I saw so many pharmacies and pharmacists struggling to move to the next level, to implement a new program, to do any number of things. And it was when we were growing our immunization program that we were building out our clinical team to support us. And I recall being in the pharmacy, and we were getting ready to offer the pharmacist there a position on my team. And while we were having the conversation, one of his technicians came over and said, "Hey, I got a question." And so he was taking care of that. And when he came back, he looked up at the ceiling and he rolled his eyes and sighed and he said, "I can't get anybody to do what I want them to do." And, I didn't realize what he was saying at first. And over the course of a few years, I worked with regional vice presidents who were struggling to get stores to do different things. And it really took a conversation that I had one evening where somebody said, "Jess, leadership skills are things that you can learn." And as he started to unpack what leadership skills were, it just hit me. This is what's missing. This is the piece of the puzzle that we don't get. It was very much the emphasis on the emphasis was on, well, hey, can you learn this particular clinical fact or skill or whatever? But we didn't really have any type of formal, intentional training around improving our leadership skills. Just that understanding that leadership skills could be learned was such an eye-opening thing for me. And as I started to go down that path myself, what I started to see leadership gaps all around me. And in all areas of life. Turn the TV on in the evening and watch the news, and you'll see all sorts of issues with leadership. You look at your place of work, and you may have supervisors who really struggle to lead people. I saw leadership challenges at the schools where my kids were attending. I saw leadership challenges within the church that I attended at the time. And really where it hit home is whenever I looked in the mirror and I realized I got leadership issues in my own house. And, that was a very humbling, period of time for me to realize that, hey, this is the piece that's been missing. And, something can absolutely be done about it. That's what got me started down that path. And I started where I was. I started learning the principles myself, and I started, with my team, having my team learn the principles. And then, it just went from there.
Yeah. So, of course, lots of time, we even lack that skill within ourselves, but it's just a reminder, unless we look in the mirror or somebody tells us that, hey, this is where you're lacking. So this is very, very essential, I would say. Yes, and that's awesome. So how do the leadership principles really influence the patient care? And what about the overall business in pharmacy, I would say? Is there a connection?
I think there's absolutely a connection. In hindsights on this have been so clear for me. But when I graduated and I first became a licensed pharmacist, I was asked. I was probably about 25 years old, and I was asked to lead a team of people who were roughly twice my age, and I was asked to provide care to a group of patients who were roughly 3 times my age, and I had no formal training or equipping for that. And so what happens is that we pick up our leadership style based on how we've been led before. And I had one of my mentors gave me this phrase that I'll share with you because I think this is such an important phrase for us to consider. And it's that everyone deserves to be led well.
Amazing.
All right. And
Yes.
just, I mean, to the listener, I ask that you just sort of simmer on that for a little bit, within wherever your environment is there somebody on your team that does not deserve to be led well? Is there a patient that you serve that does not deserve to be led well? Is there a person you don't like, that deserves to not be led well? And, I had to really struggle with that. Like, I didn't want that statement to be true, but it absolutely was. And, and so whenever I, came sort of got to wrestle with this idea and say, you know what, everybody that I come in contact with, they deserve to be led well. And what does that mean? It means, as a leader, it's about, how do you help somebody from where they are and get them to some other place?
Right.
The definition of leadership that I use is that a leader is anyone who helps someone at some time get somewhere or do something.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And and when you think of it within that term or within those terms, it becomes very, very clear that, hey, we're always leading somebody.
Yes.
The question is, where are we leading them to? Right? Are we leading them to a better place, or are we leaving them in the same place? And we have I would suggest that we have the obligation within all of healthcare. Everybody in healthcare has this obligation to help lead patients to better health. That's the intent of what we do.
Right.
So that and I would just call out that the way I look at leadership is maybe a little different than how a lot of people have come to think of leadership. A lot of people look at leadership as being about authority. And and it's that, hey, somebody's in charge and they're the one that's going to tell you what to do. And that's not necessarily true. There's a lot of people who have authority that can't get people to do things, and I just point back to the example with the young man I was looking to hire from my team. He had the authority in the pharmacy, but he was not able to get people to do what he wanted them to do. And so what good leadership is all about, it's all about influence. It's all about, how do you influence someone to do something? That's a unique skill, and a lot of folks don't get that. I was on a phone call a couple of years ago with an oncology practice, and the oncologist was so frustrated. He was like, he's like, I can't even get my patients to do their labs. Like, this is the most simple thing to do, is just go and get some blood work done. Right. He's like, I can't get my patients to do that, and he cried out. He raised his voice on the call. He said, I'm only trying to save your life, right? He had the intent, he had the authority, but what he didn't have is he didn't have the influence, right? And we need to recognize that influence is something that we can develop with everybody that we come in contact with.
Right. And it's not just within the healthcare department, within the pharmacy. I would say it is everywhere. The more we talk about it, it's more like directing to a right direction, maybe providing a roadmap. That's a bigger thing, okay? But just directing them towards doing what's right for them. So it's everywhere.
I use this as an extreme example, and it's that would you consider? And I'll ask you this question. We haven't had this conversation yet, and so I'm going to ask you this question. Would you consider a newborn baby to be a leader?
No, not quite yet.
I'm gonna challenge you to consider that a newborn baby is absolutely a leader, especially to new parents, right?
For sure, yeah.
So because it's all about influence. Right?
Yeah, I get it. Yes.
When you look at it through that lens, I think you get a different level of clarity, right?
Right.
And that you I mean, a newborn comes home, and I have 3 kids.
Yes.
And when the first kid came home, my wife and I looked at each other like, how on earth do we get into this mess?
That's mind blowing.
and then he started to cry, and it's like, well, what do we do?
What do we do? Yeah. He will teach you.
and what he did is my firstborn, my son, taught us to be some type of competent parents. Right now, he did that by it was the tool that he had was to scream and cry. Right. But whenever he would do that, we would learn that, hey, it's time for him to take a nap, or he needed to burp, or he needed to eat, or he needed a diaper change, or whatever that scenario is, right? And so, we need to recognize that everybody has some type of influence,
right?
And so, to your listeners, whether they're listening live, I see the folks that are listening live here, or whether they're listening to this at some other time. I just want to encourage you to think of yourself this way. Whether you feel empowered or not, that's not the question right now. But I want you to really be thinking of yourself. You are absolutely a leader. And with that, you have a tremendous opportunity right in front of you to be able to help all sorts of people.
Right. Yes, it's just the perception. I think everybody is powerful. They may have something within their capacity. They can, turn around, start helping people, however it may be. So, yes, and to all the people listening, thank you so much for attending. We have Hamad here. He is a great mentor and coach. So thank you everybody for joining. Saida, Asad, Halima, Iqbal, and many more listeners who will be listening to our podcast in the future, because I will be recording and updating it on the website. So from now, I think what question I have for you is, what about the foot traffic within a business? Because I deal with a lot of pharmacy owners that are having their independent pharmacies, and they are concerned about their foot traffic. What is how can leadership in pharmacy drive more foot traffic, and how can they get a good customer experience and good reviews for their independent pharmacies?
I would share a couple of thoughts here with you, if I may. Within your pharmacy, you want to have the highest performing pharmacy that you can have, right? Nobody says. Nobody gets up and says, I'm going to go to the pharmacy today and I hope that, everybody does terribly. That's not what it is. But we know that not all days in the pharmacy are created equal. There's some days that are much more challenging. There's some days that are much less challenging than others. And so what we want to do with our leadership is we want to, invest in developing our team to improve their leadership skills, because as we do that, we're going to have less waste, we're going to have higher engagement, we're going to have higher efficiency. Those are all things that are going to start to come. Now, as we do that, as we are leading our team well, right? Remember, everybody deserves to be led well, and that improves. And that, so we start with ourselves. The next line is the people around us, right? Our team. And now, what's going to happen if they start leading your customers and your patients well? What are you going to see? What are you going to see? You're going to see those folks have a better experience. Right. You're going to see the people that are providing service to your customers. You're going to see that they have an increased capacity to successfully serve people. Yep. Right. There's a lot of times where where you see people have a poor experience, and it's because that person providing the service, they just don't have all the skills that they need. And those are things that as leaders we need to help them. We need to help identify them, help them grow those, help them improve those. One of the things that I like to point out is the difference between lead measures and lag measures. Right? There's things that measure the input, and there's things that measure the output. And when we talk about, hey, we want to see the pharmacy improve, we want to see more profitability, we want to see all that stuff, that's absolutely a lag measure, right? I
For
like
sure, yeah.
I like to use absurd examples and say, you wouldn't take some dental floss, some bubble gum, and an old tennis shoe and put it in your oven and expect a birthday cake to come out, would you?
Yeah.
You wouldn't do that. But if you took
Mm-hmm.
eggs and flour and butter and whatever else and you mixed it up and put it in the pan, now you have a reasonable chance that maybe a birthday cake will come out. So if we can get the right ingredients going into this, we can get better results on the other side of that. And I'm going to suggest to you that good leadership is that lead measure. It's that input that will allow us to get that lag measure, that better experience, that increased foot traffic, those things that we want to see, those things are connected in that way.
Yeah, lots of people, lots of business owners want to get more profits, more sales, more customers, but nobody.
You haven't found one that wants less, have you?
Yeah.
You have not found a business that says, "I wish we were less profitable."
Right. That's what they are for. Yeah, that's why they are there for. And nobody wants to solve a problem. Nobody wants to give their input, provide value. Everybody wants profit, and that too overnight. So that does not happen. It takes time, right? It takes time, lots of effort, and you just have to be patient.
Time and repetition.
Yes.
And it's those good experiences that carry over. It's those good experiences that fortify your team. Right, that teams that have had some rough experiences, you get them a couple of wins because you've gotten them, you've equipped them with the skills that they need to be successful in that role. And likewise, I don't know that patients necessarily, and this is purely an opinion, but I think most patients would say they'd rather not go to the pharmacy. I think most patients would say they'd rather not go to the doctor. They'd rather not go to the hospital. They would prefer to not have that on their to-do list, right? So, when people come to us, they come to us in a time of need. They come to us in a time when their world could be turned absolutely upside down.
Right.
And, if we can make that experience better, I don't know that anybody looks forward to going back to the pharmacy, stand in line, whatever that turns out to be. But what we can do is we can make that as pleasant and as welcoming as possible.
Correct.
And give them encouragement to move forward.
Yes. So Hamad wants to add something. Yes. Hi, Hamad. How are you? You're just muted. Hi, Hamad. How are you?
So, I know. But, almost years, I would say. And the level of customer service is just amazing. Uh, it's a very stressful job because you're dealing with patients, with people in trouble and all that. But they're always smiling. So I always say, as a pharmacist or a doctor, you should behave like an airline crew. Regardless of how long is your flight, you are fine. There's a lot of that you want to do. And we are now literally in Costco, very busy, lot of food cafes. That's an excellent story, and it reminds me of an expression, and it goes something like this. It says, "All things being equal, people would prefer to do business with people that they like." Right? So if all things are equal, they would prefer to, hey, I like you, so I'll do business with you. But the second part of that is that if all things are not equal, if the cost is a little bit different, right? If all things are not equal, people still prefer to do business with people they like, right? And that's what comes to mind as you share that story, Hamad. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Yes, thank you, Hamad. That was totally inspiring story, and for sure, yeah, what Jess said, helping others, customer service, customers come first. I think that should be the moral of the story, if I'm not wrong.
Absolutely. I would agree with you. And I think if we can learn those skills to treat them as best we can, we position ourselves we position ourselves as best we can to move into the future.
Right, and I think that brings us to a very important question about staff training, upselling, promoting services, getting more customers. Is that all connected and related with the leadership principles?
I would say yes, I would agree with that. Leadership training is all about how do you empower people to do better, to be better, right? And upselling and promoting services. What are you doing with that? You're given the opportunity to help people, be better, right? That would be the idea of it. So it's absolutely connected. But the thing is that there's a lot of folks that they just sort of go through life and they just do what they have seen modeled before as far as leadership is, right? Leadership can be caught. We see somebody else do it, and leadership can be taught, but all too often it's more caught than taught. And so what we do is we simply just model what we have seen somebody else do before, and we'll do that even when we've seen them get results that we don't like.
Right.
And we'll say, well, hey, this is what we've always done. Well, what's the result that you get? Well, it's not really a good result, but we do it anyway. And I tell you this story. I was working with a pharmacist. I was an intern at the time, and there was a mother who had an issue with her daughter's medication, and the conversation did not go well. The mother was not pleased, and she stormed off. And then this pharmacist, he was like a cartoon character, and you could see the red line start at his neck and go to the top of his head, and steam come out of his ears. And I say that figuratively, but it was as close to literal as you can imagine, right? And after that conversation, he was just mad. He was mad about everything. He was he was stomping around, and like everybody in the pharmacy became on edge because of that situation. And and so what was being modeled for me is that, hey, if you ever have an encounter with a patient that just isn't real pleasant, what you should do is you should you're completely allowed to become upset and to make sure everybody else around you is miserable as well. That's what was modeled for me. Now, a few weeks later, I was working with another pharmacist, and he looks at me. It was about 6 o'clock at night. And he looks at me and he says, "I buy, you fly." And I said, "What?" He says, "I will buy dinner if you go get it." And I said, "Oh, I was a college kid. That was a deal back then. I'll take that deal." And so I went and got dinner. And when I came back, here this pharmacist is having a similar conversation. There's a mother who's not pleased with what's going on. And, and I don't know that the mother left that situation happy either. But what happened was his response was so much different. He was done. He went over in the corner and he's eating his dinner. And I remember, approaching him and saying, "Hey, aren't you supposed to be mad about this?" And he said, "No." He says, "Jess, I have way too many years of this ahead of me to let this, bother me." Right. And,
Right.
and so there's so much of what we model that it's so important, but we also need to be able to make the right decisions to model the right things, because if you're modeling the wrong thing, what you're going to do is you're not going to lead patients to an upsell. Right. I've seen staff say, "You don't have any questions for the pharmacist today, do you?" Right. What are they doing? They're discouraging the patient from having a conversation with the pharmacist that could turn into an upsell.
Right.
Right. They're avoiding that opportunity that could turn into, "Oh, you know what, you need these extra products, whatever it turns out to be, or here's a service that that you may benefit from." And so there's that's how somebody was trained at some point. That's what was modeled. We need to be able to adjust and move from that and say, "Hey, how can we serve you? What challenges are you still having? Let's get you to talk with our pharmacist. What are some of the things that are on your mind today, so that you can position those to be able to super serve those patients in your pharmacy."
Right. Let alone going an extra mile for your customer. How about just doing your job right? Some people just don't maybe want to do that as well. We have Muhammad Haris here. He wants to say something. Yes. Hi, Haris. You're muted.
Hey, Anam. Hey, Jesse. Thank you so much for giving me a chance to speak. What an amazing and interesting conversation going on. Though I joined late, but caught on a few points. And just wanted to add something. Based on my experience being a pharmacist myself and working in the pharmaceutical marketing industry for about 12 years now. And I work with a lot of pharma professionals, not only in the marketing landscape, but also people that are working in the community pharmacy or any other sector of, pharmacy. And since we were talking about, leadership lessons from a pharmacist, and here's what I recommend when it comes to training and development. I always recommend pharma professionals, coming out, as soon as they graduate, coming out, either they are just joining or maybe, 5-6 years down the road when they are having established career. I always tell them, learn the basic principles of marketing and sales. It doesn't matter if you're working in a community pharmacy and certain people ask me, "Oh, I'm not working in marketing or I'm not working in sales. Why should I learn the basic principles of these topics?" And I always tell them that if you look around, usually marketing and sales people are the people who go into leadership, right? Because they develop those skills, not only by working in those industry, but because they have a basic understanding of how, as we talk about customer service, it's directly related to marketing and sales, how customer services work, how to, upsell, how to position yourself or your brand, how to represent your brand actually. And that's an integral part of sales. So here's my recommendation for, when it comes to training and development, learn the basic principles of marketing and sales. But hey, that's my opinion, and I would definitely would like to hear more about this from you and Jesse. Once again, thank you so much, guys. This is a wonderful conversation going on, and thank you for giving me a chance to speak.
Thank you so much, Horace, for adding and your great insights. Okay, so Jess, I think we are almost coming towards the end of our wonderful conversation, but I just have one last question for you.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Yeah, what qualities help the pharmacy owners, especially independent pharmacy owners, adapt to changing market demands to get more customers?
So one of the things that I do is I have a few different lessons that I teach on this topic. You know, how do you best prepare for the future, right? Or in worst case scenario, how do you prepare for crisis, right? Because things could be turned upside down. And the first thing that I would suggest is that you want a leader who is growing, right? You show me a leader who is the same today as what he was 10 years ago, and I'm going to tell you, this is a leader who struggled today. Right? Things continue. Like, how much has the world changed in the last 10 years? I mean, the world's changed a great deal in the last 4 years. So, one of the things that you have to do is you have to have this growth mindset to be learning, these new perspectives, exposing yourself to new models and be looking for, what are new and better ways that we can do things. I remember I was visiting an independent pharmacy in the state of Georgia, and I went in to talk about medication adherence. And as we're having this conversation, I thought, I got to find something to be able to link this to. I said, well, what are you doing for your immunization program? And this would have been in 2018, so just a few years ago. And he looked at me and he said, oh, we're not doing immunizations yet. And he said, well, we're going to have to look at medication therapy management here pretty soon as well. And in the States, both of those services had more than a decade of experience available for. And here's a guy who was 12 years behind the curve, and he was very much in a place of struggle. So I share the first thing is that we need to have this idea of growth and just be out there and learning these different things. But this is what I will tell you about growth. Growth doesn't just happen, right? You have to be intentional about growing. And this idea of intentionality is a principle that absolutely changed my life. Whenever I became intentional and I shifted from the, I'll learn it whenever it comes to me, to being proactive and learning these new things and then looking for places to apply them, the game changed. It was, I went from reacting to everything to being proactive and saying, hey, you know what, we could do this about whatever problem or challenge we were facing. So, I would say that you need to have a growth mindset. You need to be intentional about your growing. And then the third thing that I would say is that you need to be consistent in your growing. This isn't something that you do every once in a while. Whenever you do this regularly, that's when, I think that's really where the magic happens. Successful people do consistently what unsuccessful people do occasionally. And so if you are consistent in that particular context, I think you would position yourself to be able to adapt to whatever changes come to the marketplace, right? You would be able to say, hey, we can do this, we can do that, or you may be better positioned at least to know where to look if you don't have those answers right away.
Awesome. So consistency, number one, and patience. Amazing. I think that's very good. And I think people should take notes. But if anybody wants to join in, they want to share their thoughts, they're welcome. And I just want to say that leadership, it's just about guiding your team. It's enhancing lives of patients and creating a thriving business. So if you want to do that, learn how to become good leaders. So I think we have come to the end of this session, but thank you so much, Jess, for becoming our amazing speaker for today. Thank you so much, all of you listeners, for joining in and listening to our conversation. We will be uploading this recorded podcast on our website. We have Ali Malik. Hey, Ali, how are you? Think I allowed him. Okay, allowed to speak. Yeah, Ali. You're just muted. Ali, you're muted. Oh, I think, okay, okay, he is asking to speak. Yeah, let's go, Ali.
Amazing podcast. And Jesse, thank you for providing such great insights from your own experience. I have a very quick question, and I know we were talking about leadership for the last few minutes, but what I'm trying to understand from your experience is that how do you how do you train and onboard new team members, and how do you inculcate these qualities in them? Because I understand that a lot of this is based on your experience and from one-on-one coaching, but do you think there needs to be like a structured program to support something like this and to encourage people to be more proactive in their work?
I do. I absolutely do that. I would tell you that whenever I began my leadership journey, I started with myself because that was the easiest place for me to start. And whenever I started there, I was quick to see the results of working on those particular skills. What I did is I was so excited at the time. I went to my team and I said, "Hey, I want you to be working on your leadership skills. I don't care what areas it is that you're working on. I just want you to be doing that." And I actually gave them permission that, I don't believe that you become a good leader by sitting through, a half day workshop or a weekend workshop or whatever it turns out to be. I absolutely believe that, your leadership skills will develop with consistency over time. And so you need to have a mechanism in place to be developing that. So, with my first team that I did that with, what I did is I just gave them permission. And, I had some that looked at, hey, I need to work on my public speaking skills. I had others that were looking at problem solving. I had others that were looking at negotiations. Whatever that area was, I gave them that permission. And then I actually told them to schedule time to do it. Because I recognize that it's not a cost, it's an investment. It's an investment in them up leveling their skills, that by them taking a few minutes at the beginning, and we would do this typically on Mondays. If you would take a few minutes at the beginning of the week to get a new perspective, learn a new skill, just expose yourself to that new thing. Now what you do is you take that out into the rest of your work week. And you do that, and you're leveraging that with the people that you come in contact with, and you're seeing the results. One of my mentors uses the phrase. He says, "Learn a little bit, do a little bit. Learn a little bit, do a little bit." And so that's what we were doing. We were learning a little bit and then doing a little bit. When I went on and I was working with independent pharmacies, I recognized that my team had to build influence quickly. Because we could talk to any of these independent, we had 1,800 independent pharmacies that we were working with. And if we didn't build that influence, we were going to be in a world of trouble, because we could spend all this time working with them. And as soon as we walked away, they could be like, forget you. I'm going to do what I want to do. So we really worked on that. And so at that point, I used a more of a standard curriculum to go through. And that's what we did every Monday. Every Monday morning, we as a team, we learned a new principle. We learned a new principle. and we were able to use that principle throughout the week, and then it layers over time, right? It's interesting. People would come back and say, "Oh, this is the scenario that I'm dealing with." And, it would take very little prompting from me, but they would say, "Oh, based on whatever principle or these principles that we've learned over the last couple of weeks, maybe this is what I should do." And it would be like, "Yeah, go ahead, try that. Let's see how that works out." Or, I gave them the permission to grow and strengthen their wings with the work that they were doing. But that's probably a longer answer than what you expected here, my friend. But I absolutely believe that the solution is, more of a layered approach, and that you just go consistently over time and you just keep building on it. And then, something else that I think was very, very helpful within the teams is that you had people that you were traveling that road with, right? There was a built-in accountability. There was the opportunity for iron to sharpen iron as they dealt with some of those different challenges. And that builds a resilience that you may not necessarily find. You can get a book and you can read a book, and that's great. And you're going to get a little bit better by doing that. I would be hard pressed to think that you could read a book on leadership and be worse off after that. But how do you implement that? How do you make that stick and build results from it? It's time and repetition, and that's what you need. That's what you need to get to.
Thank you so much, Jesse, for that detailed answer. I think what I'm hearing is that it's day in, day out a challenge, and taking that challenge head on and supporting your team is the key. And as you rightly pointed out, it's a lot of experiential learning as well as theory, keeping the theory and the values and the principles and the back of your mind are crucial. So thank you so much for that. Really appreciate it.
That was a great question. Thank you for asking that.
Thank you, Ali. Thank you, Jess. Thank you, all of our listeners. And a huge thank you to Jess for joining us today and sharing your expertise on leadership in pharmacy. We come towards the end of our session now. I will see you all in the next podcast. And remember, we will be uploading our podcast recorded on the website. So anybody who has missed it, they can still go ahead and take advantage of that. Thank you so much, all of you, and have a great day. Thanks, and bye-bye.